Mr. Brian.
Let's do it.
How are you, sir?
Good. Thanks for having me. This is exciting. Certainly, we were talking about coming in. This is my first chance of doing anything like this, and we were both podcast fans. We're talking about, so I'm having flashbacks of some of the ones I watch on YouTube and whatnot, and feeling in a proper studio. It's pretty cool and exciting.
Yeah, like I told you before, I feel like there needs to be more companies like mine and yours, where they look at this industry more at a scale level, and we love being in this space, and we like to kind of take that knowledge and that investments and kind of put it back into the business itself and grow it to a level where we can bring more awareness and educations and podcasts like this. And I came across you a while ago, AeroBarrier, I think. How did I find out about AeroBarrier? Yeah, so I remember. So obviously I know of building knowledge and air quality. They have amazing courses as it pertains to new constructions, and more specifically around net zero builds. And AeroBarrier was a big part of that. And for those of you that don't know anything about AeroBarrier, and I'll let Brian take it over, they are one of the only I think they're the only companies that they have taken draft proofing to another level. I think that's how I say it. You have completely revolutionized how draft proofing should be conducted, predominantly in new constructions and a little bit on the retrofit market, I would say.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I'd say we're a relatively new company, new technology, and it's been more of a business focus more than anything. As the lowest hanging fruit.
But the work you guys have done, of how a builder should look at draft proofing and prioritize it of a level of importance and go beyond what I call this is interesting, and they're willing to actually cut a check and bring you guys in to implement it has been incredible. And you guys have been working with some pretty high profile, maybe some of the industry leaders as it pertains to builders in this field. Anyways, but before we get into all of that, you know what I mean? I like to talk about the beginning of AeroBarrier. So you strike me as an entrepreneur. I'm sure you have some scar tissue stories there to kind of discuss that. So tell us how AeroBarrier started and what inspired it to become what it is today, and kind of give us that line of sight.
Sure, yeah. So technology is based out of the US, and the longer history of it is they started with this idea of how do we solve a problem with solving duct leakage in the US, and primarily not as big of a problem here in Canada, but if you can think about Florida and the temperature conditions down there, they have quite a bit of duct runs through attic spaces, so ducts through unconditioned spaces that were leaking and causing massive mold and damage problems. So the Department of Energy in the US actually commissioned the University of Berkeley and Professor Dr. Madera to say, hey, how do we go and solve this problem? And with a whole research team behind it, they came up with this really cool idea of being able to pressurize the space from the inside, using that pressure to seal leaks from the inside out. And that started as a duct leakage program almost about 20 years ago now, and it has grown to a company in itself called AeroSeal, using this idea of pressurize, mist in a sealant, use the pressurization to drive it and seal any leakage areas. Solve some massive problems both in residential and commercial spaces, and has grown into a very successful business in itself. The owners of that technology, our CEO, a gentleman named Hamed Ghanbari, kind of saw the vision of, okay, we've taken this idea of sealing from the inside out. What else can we apply this to? And they kind of played around with, and with their engineers in-house, and then back with the university and Professor Madera. Okay, what if we could take this and apply it to the whole house and think about moving the needle from an envelope perspective? We know from the building industry side of things, it's been a challenge going back almost 30 years of, okay, we want to build better energy efficient homes. Air leakage is the largest slice of the pie, and we haven't really been able to find a way consistently to reduce it in a meaningful and consistent way across project to project. So they went back to the university, commissioned them to come up with, okay, take the same idea of duct sealing, how do we apply it to home sealing? They changed the formula and really went to this concept of similar to blower door testing as you would for an energy audit, using that same equipment to pressurize the house and put in the sealant. So that came to the market, it was about to launch in 2018. At the same time, similarly, my father, Brian Cooke, had been managing and running one of the larger energy advisor firms on the new construction side of things, and building science expert here in Canada, had heard about this developing technology and this idea of, there's an answer to this challenge that he's been working with builders facing for years and years and years. And so basically he had met with Hamed, and they talked about it. It was that they were had a coffee at a conference in a hallway and just talked for hours about what this could look like. And Gord basically said, hey, I want to be a part of this, bringing it to Canada in a meaningful way. So what that looked like, I was working in a different career at the time, and took a leap from more of a business background, from working in consumer goods. My father said, hey, this is a really cool opportunity and a chance to do something different. So I kind of took the plunge and put away my work clothes and traded them in for some work boots and a hard hat. And my partner Scott and I started sealing homes about 4 years ago with this technology.
Amazing. So there's a lot there.
Sorry, I went.
No, it's amazing. I love it. But you give me plenty of stuff to talk about more. So let's take it back. Let's just take it back. Let's go back to the original inception of this technology. So it was originally used to seal ducts from the inside out in Part 3 and Part 9 existing buildings, predominantly in Florida. Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, Florida, or just anywhere where there was conditioned duct runs through unconditioned spaces. That was
so for example, if they had ducts running through garages, or if they had ducts running through crawl spaces or basements, and then this is the intake and the output, right? Both. So, okay, gotcha. And then in that particular case, your units were set up within these ducts, and then the sealing was had to take place. And can you what were the kind of returns on ROI back then if someone, like let's say in a Florida building, wants to kind of undertake this responsibility? Like tell us about those ROIs that kind of inspired to take the technology and really apply it to new construction, new built homes.
Sure, yeah. So I think the biggest ROI right out of the gate is they were having massive mold problems, first and foremost, from that duct leakage so you have duct leakage, you have conditioned air going through a space, hitting the more moist air on the outside, let's say in Florida where it's really wet, condensing and having trouble with it, causing mold problems in attics and attic rain and that sort of thing. So it was really fixing a massive liability problem more than anything. And then from an energy savings, we quickly learned, okay, now when you have better sealed duct runs, your equipment doesn't have to work as hard. As we've all been in that house where I know growing up, I was in a similar house where the furthest bedroom from the house never gets air conditioning, no matter how hard you run your air conditioning, and your basement's freezing cold. So now we can start to run our HVAC equipment the way it's supposed to be used and designed, and there's some real energy savings, kind of anywhere between, I'd say, on the high end, about 10%. And then on the commercial side of things, when you start talking about moving large volumes of air across huge pressure differences and stack high buildings, the ROI becomes just a no-brainer for some of these institutional buildings, and so that's been an exciting side of the business as well. Our commercial business has been absolutely skyrocketing, really around the world. Like they're bringing AeroSeal equipment to places like Abu Dhabi and England and US, Vegas. They're starting to seal some really cool buildings and solving some interesting building science challenges.
You know what's so interesting about technology like yours, and maybe just net zero homes and more energy efficient construction systems to begin with? What I love about it is that the last thing it starts with resiliency and just building good quality homes and buildings that last, and that contributes to it. And then it leads to occupancy comfort, which is exactly what you talked about, getting air to the farthest locations into the house. And then the last one is, by the way, 10% on residential, huge savings on commercial. So it's the energy savings of it, the energy efficiencies of it. And this is something that actually Andy and Gord speak to too, but in their building knowledge courses. It's at the bottom of the list. Not to say it's not important, but the whole resiliency and occupancy element, which, by the way, there's nothing in the code that actually speaks to that. They're the leading factors that makes people take actions. You can fix molds and you avoid things like attic rain. And by the way, people are going to be more comfortable. And by the way, there's incredible amount of savings. Okay, so Did it in Florida. Everybody loved it. Hey, why don't we do this? Why don't we go beyond the dock? That's what happened, like beyond the dock system. So it since its birth to Part 9. So and then kind of took that technology, so proven concept, connected with Gord, love the technology, let's bring it to Canada. Are you guys predominantly focused in Canada?
So our organization, we kind of, let's say we basically have launched the Canadian division or the Canadian arm of the technology, both here locally and then working to build out our network across the country as well.
Perfect. And then your focus right now, is it Part 3 and Part 9, or are you predominantly focused on Part 9?
Yeah, primarily look, we are working our group mostly on low-rise residential, kind of up to anything up to kind of 3 to 5 stories. But we just completed as our group our first high-rise building here in Toronto as well.
Congratulations! Tell us about that.
Yeah, so that's one of our partners on the commercial side of things that have just finished that as well. So the technology it just has this really cool wide application, and that we've done, I joke, we've done anything up from like 20 air change, really old 100-year-old heritage homes to high-rise buildings. We sealed a shed just for fun one day. It really, leaky or tight, passive house or net zero, AeroBarrier is going to bring value to that space, and it's been cool. In the last 4 years, got a chance to play around with lots of different types of buildings.
So let's talk about that value, and maybe you can use a case study for us to kind of really identify value. Can you walk us through a project and really touch up on the value from the resiliency, occupancy comfort first, and then kind of let's get a little geeky and really talk about ACH and the reduction in ACH and the energy savings as a result of that. Can you kind of walk us through that value chain and with a case study in mind? And we can use a commercial. I know you guys are working with some pretty high profile builders across Canada. Maybe you can throw some names out there too, just so everybody knows you're serious.
Sure.
And then kind of like give us that comprehensive understanding of what this product is.
Yeah, sure. So, going back to, the history of it, we talked a little bit about where does all this, information and building science data really come from. It's kind of neat. It's a Canadian experience where they were trying to figure out how to save energy, and as they were trying to figure out how to save energy, they were causing some side effects with problems with the house. And what we fundamentally learned that we all kind of understand we want to add insulation to save energy, but as we do that, we need to move air tightness along with it. And if we don't do that, we're causing potential problems with, again, mold and condensation. So we, as an industry, as a country, we know we want to build more higher performance homes, and we know that we kind of have to move 3 things all at once. You can't pull one string. You'll hear this geeky term, house as a system.
It's a Canadian concept, house as a system.
That's right.
Managing heat, moisture, and air. Yes, and as Andy likes to put it, not to do dumb things.
So you kind of have to, like a lot of things, you have to do all of them in conjunction. So you add insulation, you build the house more airtight, and then you ventilate accordingly so that we all have fresh and conditioned air as best. And that's how you build not just the most energy efficient home, but actually, by the way, the home that's going to last the longest and perform the way we all expect our new homes to. So that's kind of the history of it. The air tightness challenge of it is, insulating and some of the HVAC equipment historically has been, a little easier to plan for at the design stage. We have great, partners and manufacturers of these products, but air tightness was always a bit of a collection and more of a training side of things, where you have no particular trade that was responsible for air tightness, and that you have lots of different trades all working in the house together, managed by maybe a builder or a site super, and they all need to be pulling on the rope together to be able to get to the highest result. So as we're building more and more homes, we have electricians, plumbers, the cable guy, the insulator, the drywaller, the framer, all contributing to how well the house is going to perform from an air tightness perspective. Different crews coming in and out, being able to have everyone on the same page is really the only path to being able to do this well. And ultimately, unfortunately, it would fall on the shoulders of the builder to make sure that they're hitting these specific targets and manage them. And that becomes a pretty stressful and intense problem for them at scale as they try to take that step. Having that one house that maybe wasn't doing as well as the next one, wanting to be able to deliver the same quality to all their customers became a challenge. And that's really where our role is adding some consistency to the air tightness challenge, providing a verifiable process that allows every house to really take that next step and really push aside any of those resiliency problems that we've talked about, now we can get every house down to a level of air tightness that we're no longer worrying about moisture problems. We're no longer worrying about potential resiliency problems. Now we're just going and getting the most energy efficiency out of it. Oh, and by the way, we're gonna, the house is gonna be more comfortable to live in. It's gonna have as much noise problems. If you're living in a semi, maybe you're not gonna hear your neighbor, or smell your neighbor as much. So it brings a whole host of benefits to the end user. And again, we can do that at scale across, not just one house. Oh, we did it, we put a label on it, and then we forget about the whole process of net zero. Now we can start doing net zero at scale. And I think that's what you're alluding to, and really exciting, is we're starting to work with some of the biggest builders, and not just with AeroBarrier, but a lot of the biggest builders are seeing this as an opportunity to really separate themselves, take on some of the pieces that they always wanted to, and we're seeing net zero on full site executions, and so we have partners like Hamed Ghanbari and Activa in the Waterloo region, where they're launching and selling full net zero sites, which is just really exciting for everyone.
And I think that's very interesting, right? Because builders, by definition, are extremely cost conscious. And for someone like Hamed Ghanbari to say, you know what, it is worth it to spend that premium. And frankly speaking, that premium is not as high as what we thought it would be in comparison to all these benefits that it comes out of resiliency, occupancy comfort, and energy savings. I think that's something amazing. So I would love to know, obviously I'm sure the first meeting with Hamed Ghanbari, let's if we go back 3 years ago, the first meeting with Hamed Ghanbari were not as convincing as it is right now. Like where do you see the biggest barriers to entry in terms of mindset of a builder when they hear about your product first?
Yeah, I think like everyone, it looks like a line item cost, and as I mentioned, we still see ourselves as a bit of the new kids on the block.
Right.
There's not a ton of innovation in construction, and rightfully so. But it's a lot of trades, like different trades have been doing things the one way they've always done them, and we almost see ourselves as a new trade. So it looks like someone in that office has to justify what's this new line item of a cost that they're not normally used to spending. But as you sit down and start working with builders, particularly ones who have an experience with energy efficiency measures, they know that maybe it wasn't a line item on their budget, but particularly it was, and that they're spending foams, caulks, time, and energy on site. And when you get them to start dimensionalizing, oh, we are spending a whole lot of dollars, time, and energy, and still not getting the results. Once you get them to dimensionalize that, I think and once we get working with builders, they mostly see the path as, oh, this is actually going to make our lives easier. Therefore, it's probably going to be less expensive overall for us to use something like AeroBarrier.
So I think that was their kind of aha moment, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the progression we see with most of our builder clients. To your point of that first conversation with Hamed, this really has been a lot of times, this is 4 years of work. We believe in this model of let us show you one. We always offer up demo pricing. Let's get out there, let's do one together. Then we can take that back, bring it to an energy advisor, an SO firm like yourself, and say, hey, what does that look like in an energy model for you guys? What are some of the things you could save? What are some of the things you could change? And what does a world look like if every house now was at that new level of air tightness? Maybe we do. So we are kind of on this path of do 1, do 10, do 30 together. Okay, what does a site look like? And then hopefully that evolves into, okay, we're just a part of the fabric of how you guys build homes. So I'd say we're at that do sites level, and we're hoping to take that step to, we want to be in builders' DNA and really become a standard as it comes to air sealing.
Yeah, I'm sure it was an uphill battle at the beginning. Because it's very hard. Maybe in some ways it's easier to go after a builder that has scale, right? Because they can see that, right? Yeah, we have a site guy, he walks around. We do this work anyways in a very not so efficient way. It would be amazing to kind of systemize it, and then the cost saving is there because we have their salaries, those billable hours. Does that typically happen by the builder itself, that they have to go around and do like caulking and weatherproofing, and not to mention they need to be aware of those common 20 to 25 spots to begin with, which is incredibly hard.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say we have, without AeroBarrier, put AeroBarrier aside, we're fortunate to be in a location in Ontario where about 25% of the homes, I think over the last 10 years, have been built to an Energy Star level. So we have a lot of really skilled builders who have been working at this for years, Mattamy included. But most of our production builders have some idea of what goes into it. The ones that do it well do it for the most part exactly what you said. They have their own crew. They don't go and have a trade out there to do air tightness. They have their own handyman crew that follows the trades around and tries to do those things on a manual basis on every single house. And that's how they've been able to be successful for years now. They've been probably working at that, trying to perfect it for almost a decade. So when we go to show them AeroBarrier, they have a pretty good idea of what their pain point is already. That gives us a good starting point to work off.
One of the common issues that every industry is facing right now, especially the construction industry, is a shortage of trades. So in some ways, one can argue that you're actually minimizing the work hours of trades, and hopefully they can put it into better use if they go with the AeroBarrier system, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. That's probably been, you mentioned that aha moment. I think that was one of the early ones that we really figured out, for builders, our learning has really been their site supers are probably the most valuable asset to them. They if you watch them, it's their jobs. It's incredible, and everything they have going on. They're literally managing 16 different companies on site of absolute chaos. And so when they have to shoulder the load for air tightness on top of that,
I love you probably more than the builder itself.
So you get to take that and let them really do their jobs, and take that worry. We joke around. We'd have site supers, but they would follow the blower door tester on final day on each house and be like, is this one going to pass? Is this one going to pass? And taking that load off their shoulders is just invaluable to builders, because that site super, their main responsibility is making sure they can hand over the keys to the homeowner when they promise to, and deliver the house that they set out to. So anything that we can help take that tension and anxiety off their shoulders, let them do their valuable work, which is managing the whole site and the bigger picture. That's been our biggest value proposition that, and the feedback, that we've gotten back from our builder clients, that it has been really the most compelling, I think, and interesting to us over our 4-year history.
Right. So we talked about AeroBarrier in comparison to a typical site guy, assuming that he's knowledgeable and assuming he has time, which are two really big assumptions to begin with. And then AeroBarrier, this comprehensive system, both from a product and service perspective, can completely handle that particular task. And I think it's also very important to double tap on two other category of benefits. One of them is compliance. Moving forward, there's going to be a certain expectations from an energy efficiency perspective as it pertains to getting a permit. Homes that are going to be built, they have to follow a strict air sealing requirement. We measure that at ACH at 50 Pascal, air change per hour at 50 Pascal, and there's a number that you need to achieve. For those people that are not familiar with the term ACH is the movement of air, how much air is flowing through the house and how much air is flowing through out of the house and is being replaced by fresh air. And the objective is to try to, within the building science component, keeping all components in mind that are integrated together, is to bring that to as low as possible. So a typical brand new construction home without an AeroBarrier can have an ACH of, I would say, between 3 and 5.
Sure.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think the building code, while it doesn't mandate today, references in Ontario that it kind of expects a house to be around 3 and a half.
3.5.
So we've certainly showed up to houses where it starts higher, unfortunately.
Yeah. So I would say probably around that neck of the wood. And then, so tell me about the benefits of AeroBarrier as it pertains to that in terms of reducing, and then the longevity of it from an energy efficiency cost saving perspective.
Sure. Yeah, I think you touched on a couple things there. So we talked about really briefly that about 25% of our homes in the last decade roughly have been built to Energy Star. So they would have actually been performing blower door tests and beating some of those requirements that we just talked about. 75% of the buildings entering the market that maybe have never had an eye to air tightness testing. And we're seeing, we joke, it's not a matter of if, but when, mandatory air tightness testing is coming for good reasons. We have climate change goals as a nation, industry goals. And we know, quite frankly, we're able to do this now at scale. There's no reason, Canadians were pretty proud. I think there's 26 U.S. states that now have mandatory blower door testing. we don't want those guys ahead of us. Like states like Texas and Michigan should never be more progressive than us in any.
Considering the fact that it's a Canadian concept to begin with.
That's right.
Is the blower door a Canadian invention? I know building science is a Canadian invention. Is the blower door system within itself is a Canadian invention?
It's kind of like one of those. Like almost like the telephone where there's 2 or 3 people that were working. Yes, it's credited to a gentleman who was given the Order of Canada, Harold Orr, who is a Canadian. He is credited as the father of air tightness testing, and the patents from air tightness and blower door are at least partially credited to a Canadian in a lot of ways.
Yeah, you're right. You're totally right. And as you know, like as the gurus of, as Andy used to say, blower door test is more about keeping buildings dry than about the energy savings that it contributes to. So,
we've known for years that this is the right thing to do. We've had a challenge being able to do it at scale. So that's probably why we haven't mandated it, quite frankly. Right. Now that we have not just our AeroBarrier, but lots of technologies and expertise within the industry to be able to, there's really no excuse to not being able to have some level of consistency from an air tightness perspective on every single house. So we know we're heading in that direction, both from a resiliency, but also an energy side of things. And then to really quick and dirty for your question of, okay, we talk about air changes per hour. I always like to preface, think about them to our audience as a bit of an index. They don't necessarily mean all that much. It's at an exaggerated pressure, but it gives us a chance to really compare one house to the next. So we talked about that building code house being at 3 air changes. If we were able to cut that in half to 1.5 on every house, which kind of gets us to that net zero level, you're looking at anywhere between 15 to 20% savings in gas consumption, assuming you're using natural gas, which is a huge step. It's just that if you look at the energy a house is using and divide it into a pie chart, the biggest slice has always been and remains air tightness. So it's the next one we need to take
15 to 20% off your cost. And so that's incredibly high. It's very hard to find other mechanisms of constructions within the household that can deliver such savings. And it's incredible that you guys have been able to do it, because in new constructions, there's very little meat on the bone, right? I mean, they're already going with the condensing furnaces, and there's already R50 or R60 in the attic, and the walls are already at R30, and at minimum, they're going with Energy Star vinyl, R34 ER rating, although U value is more important than the ER rating. We'll get into that later. So it's already, there is fair bit of energy efficiency implemented, and you guys come in, here's our system, another 15 to 20% on top, which is incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. To your point, I would agree. It's like we've been on this progression, every version of the building code we want to improve, and so in the last 15 years, I think the average house energy consumption on houses is basically cut in half, and I think we've taken on and added things that have been the easiest to do as an industry. We added more insulation, we've worked through improving, we're at the 99% efficiency furnaces. There really is no further to go on HVAC and installation that makes any sense. The last 2 pieces for the industry that we really have to do is get air tightness done once and for all, and maybe start thinking about electrifying in different ways. The 2 biggest steps builders can make is improve air tightness and maybe switch to a heat pump. Depending on what kind of windows they're using, there might be some room to improve there as well. But there's not a lot of room to this path to net zero.
I think the 2 new, if you want to get, I think the 2 or maybe the 3 new pillars of net zero homes, which is amended by 2030 for new construction, and 2050. Is it 2050 or 2052? I'm not entirely sure. 2050 for retrofit homes. Let's just say it's 2050. It's the rise of electrifications that you have noted, that you have just mentioned, and it's just a question of, if you compare to where we are today and the delta that needs to happen in order to us to get there by 2030 for new constructions and by 2050 for retrofit, is really step up your game when it comes to draft proofing and undertake a professional measure such as yourself to really bring that ACH to 1.5. Because although you guys have done better than 1.5, I've seen it. We had the pleasure of going to the site and seeing it in action. I think it was 2 weeks ago, and you guys actually had lower than 1.5. It seems like.
Yeah, absolutely. That's kind of the cool part about this system is it allows you to really dial in and drive to whatever level you want. It seals, and I'll caveat it, our technology is really good at little holes. So we work with builders that know what they're doing. They do a good job with sealing those large
new
holes.
constructions, I think the big holes as a result of plumbing, electrical, and other mechanical penetrations. I mean, there are no-brainers, and they've already been rectified. It's the many small holes that are everywhere.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So and that's kind of that history I was talking about. I still don't want to take away credit from the hard work that builders like Mattamy have done working on, getting it down to a level that in most, even I would say going back again versus let's say the U.S., they're putting blower door testing in, but they're not even getting the results that like a Mattamy Homes is before we would get there. Yeah. They've done a good job of, to your point, processing down and getting the large holes, and we're helping push him to that next level.
It's funny. I look at AeroBarrier in the following way, and I think it makes sense. Everybody knows how to wash their hands, and people do a fair degree of good jobs washing their hands. Let's assume that they do. Let's assume that we do. But as we're getting fine-tuned within the industry, we are now working in a surgical room where you really need to fine-tune and minimize the level of bacteria. And I think so you have to kind of go beyond the traditional sense of washing your hand, and you have to really fine-tune to really sterilize everything in order to perform. And I feel like that level of preciseness and fine-tuning is happening within the construction industry, hence the need for a technology like this to really take you to that level. Because we're not talking ACH 3 and 4, we're talking about 1.5 and below. And for that, you need to go beyond washing hands. How was that analogy?
I like it. Yeah,
okay.
It makes sense. I think that last mile. I think and then what you're alluding. We've worked a lot of builders. That last mile, getting every house under 1.5 or under 1, that can take weeks and time and pressure, and they still don't necessarily deliver on it. It's really hard for the builders at scale to be able to do it, and that's really what we feel our role is helping to enable to take that step without the worry.
Barrier. Come for the ACH of 1.0 and stay for resiliency and occupancy comfort. That's our slogan.
Yeah.
And this is important, right? Because in addition for it to have all these multi-tier benefit, it is going to be a compliance. You need to comply with it. Typically speaking, these level of compliances gets kickstarts in province of BC, which is about 2 to 3 years ahead of everybody else, and then it just gets mandated through. Do you see that the new mandates from the National Building Code kind of like pushing this market towards the right direction?
Yeah, I think there's we the building code is we talk about it being it's the minimum, it's the bare minimum, but we often as an industry they'll push that floor, that bare minimum up, and we know that we talked about just briefly before, all of the easy other parts that we need to do as an industry to move the needle from an energy efficiency standpoint have kind of been done and mandated already. Air tightness is really the last frontier that is going to meaningfully improve the average home. So yeah, we fully expect air tightness testing to be mandatory at some point within the next, let's say, 5 years, maybe 7 years. It will come because, quite frankly, it needs to for us to react to real climate change problems. And our role within the housing industry, air tightness ends up being the last frontier that we need to do on every single house.
Then if you convince the homeowner to go with a tri-pane window, more comfort, that would be a bonus on top of it all. But yeah, it's incredible and it's exciting how far we have come along and how much work we still need to do, but how close we are actually to kind of achieve that. We got the Canada Greener Home Grants that really focuses on the retrofit market and is in line with that, the rise of the electrifications and switching people to air source heat pump, more emphasis on draft proofing and solar panels. And on the new construction front, man, where do you see the market in the next 5 years?
Yeah, we definitely see it accelerating, like I said, and we see more and more builders of the larger side of things. As we talked about, these things are becoming easier for them, and like anything with scale becomes more cost effective, where we have builders that are looking at net zero ready, let's say before putting solar on, as really relatively cost neutral for them and as a differentiator for them. in that, okay, we know we can do this based on our history and our experience with a product like AeroBarrier. Why wouldn't we go and sell and differentiate ourselves versus maybe the builder across the street? So, net zero adoption, net zero ready. I think there's been 1,000 of them done in Canada to date. There'll probably be almost 1,000 of them this year. So the number of homes is going to keep doubling each year. I think as you see the leaders of the industry start to do net zero ready at scale, it's really going to force the whole next wave of builders to react and hopefully, as like anything, as more people jump on board, affordability and costing comes down for everyone, and all of a sudden as an industry you've made a change, a cost control change that's benefiting everyone from a climate change perspective.
What do you see the challenges, Brian? What keeps you up at night?
Ourselves, we're
aside from your new aside from your twin babies, I should say, what keeps you up at night?
They are keeping me up at night. I think for us, it's been a cool journey in 4 years where we're growing, and from a business side, we're trying to scale up and make sure that we're keeping up with the opportunities ahead of us. So that's been really exciting, and that probably the challenges of how do you build a business has been fun, but we spent a lot of time on that. And I really look at it. I think it's really just we want to be, our goal as a company is to really be the standard for airtightness. We want, when builders go to think about, okay, now that mandatory airtightness testing is coming on, we want to be ready, big enough, and have our process buttoned down enough that we're the obvious choice for them as they think about maybe never doing a test to, okay, now I need to start hitting a level of performance. We want to have our business ready to be able to take that on. So, as the industry moves that way, we want to work towards being the standard in air sealing.
For individuals that are interested in this industry as a whole, whether it's being net zero or wanting to learn more about AeroBarrier, both working with you and kind of like becoming partners with you, what are some of the feedback and suggestions that you have for them?
I think for us, like the building science side of it, I think is the most interesting, and there's a host of SOs and energy organizations that will basically pay for training or really cost-effective training. So it's out there. Enbridge has, they used to have, I think they'll have a version of it, their savings by design program. For a builder, that is like the best start. They will hire or pay for you to go through a session and work through everything it is that you are trying to build and help map out what that next step looks for you and provide incentives along the route. So that's a really good starting point. As an individual, I'd say, there's lots of courses out there. I think maybe one of we were talking about it in terms of think about you're coming to become an EA. That process, there's, the government has come out, quite frankly, and said there is not enough of them for where they need to go. As a career opportunity, I think it's about to absolutely blow up and be an exciting one for, we're seeing, and I'm seeing a little bit more and more of it, people coming out of school, some programs, at George Brown, there's some programs coming out, college, building science, college programs. Mm-hmm. So educate, school, take a course. I wrote my energy advisor exam just kind of as a practice for myself, and it's a challenging process, but worthwhile in terms of if you want to immerse yourself in it. There's, I think, a host of opportunities down that way.
I feel like we are already in an escalated perfect storm. Unless the recession comes in and just messes up the whole thing, but it would just delay it. It would not mess it up. I feel like there's if you just take the three major metropolitan cities within Canada, Greater Montreal area and Greater Toronto area and Greater Vancouver area, there is this natural demand for trades. A majority of workforce is retiring. There are estimates of hundreds of thousands of people that need to be in the apprenticeship programs to fulfill that need. Already there are companies specializing in robotics promising to fill this unfixable gap of trades, which is insane. Promise Robotics being one of them that we were introduced to during the summer camp. I was like, my God, are we actually entering into that, right? So just imagine that there's just a natural shortage of trades. On the other hand, we are dealing with housing crisis. lack of infill rents, and municipalities being more prone to approving high density projects to fulfill these needs in anticipation of housing crisis. And last time I checked, housing crisis, it's something that would require decades to fix. It's not a quick fix. So it's going to be around forever. So take that as another pillar of influence. And then the third of it is energy efficiency, mandates and requirements and compliance, focusing on resiliency and occupancy comforts, and then obviously the actual savings that it delivers. You combine them all together, and then cross-reference that against the programs that are out there by the government to kind of build that to address this need. It's an incredible time. It's an incredible time to roll up your sleeve, get into trades, and tackle a profession within these realms, whether it's AeroBarrier or becoming an energy advisor. Heck, become a framer. I feel like I've seen the salaries that they make. It's incredible. Like, it's just this shortage. It's just like these vivid shortage of people that need to undertake these responsibilities to build higher quality homes. And I truly believe that, and hopefully more of us will do it than the robots, but to be determined.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, the trade shortages aren't going away, and I believe in exactly what you're saying. There's massive tailwind in the field that we're in, and so from a business opportunity, it really becomes a no-brainer. And then I came from an industry before when selling forestry products and cutting down trees, and I'll say it's certainly a lot more fun having that at the end of the day, knowing that you were in an industry that was actually helping change, and what that tailwind is really, as a society, we know we got to do better, and so we are investing our tax dollars up front to try to do better. And I like your point. If I could have the choice of where to roll my sleeves up, something that you can feel proud about. Or I have my new twin daughters, and hopefully it sounds a little hokey, but honestly, it is certainly a lot more fun when you can feel good about the work that you're doing.
Honestly, I think one of the reasons why I wanted to be an entrepreneur within that space after multiple failures in other spaces, where that I love the monetary aspect of having your own business, but I was also a little greedy from the perspective of I wanted to have the monetary aspect, but I also wanted to make an impact within the realm of what I do. And I think it's very rewarding to have it both, and I feel like if you come in with that 5 to 10 year mindset, there is no way that this industry or the subsets within this industry will disappoint you, because there is this natural emerging trend that is happening irrespective. It's not like opening a restaurant right smack in the middle of COVID. Jesus. No, it's one of those things that it's already on the rise both at the micro and macro level. And if you're willing to put in the time, it's very hard to come out as a failure at the end of it.
That's been probably the biggest aha personally for me coming into the construction industry is there's just this endless amount of opportunity. And again, we were kind of talking about it. It's kind of unique in that because it's such a vast and growing segment that you don't have to spend a lot of your energy competing.
Right. Like I think I couldn't agree with you more. I think the information is abundant, and I think from a philosophical perspective, good things tend to happen when you give, and I think giving should be a huge part of that, a huge part of this industry in order for it to grow and get to a level that it needs to get. And it was incredible to kind of see Building Knowledge and at the forefront of it during the building summer camp that took place. Remind me again when it took place.
April.
April. And then kind of making those promises and being on the same bandwagon. Like, we need to continue this good work and move forward with it. Mr. Brian, you can look at the camera or you can look at me. You got the final say, and the last minute of this podcast is yours. I'll turn the mic over to you.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. I can get excited to talk about any of this stuff. So it was really neat. For us, like I said, our mantra really is about being new. We like to try things. So our offer would be give us a call. We'd love to show you what we can do on site, whether that's on one of your projects as a builder, as a homeowner. That future together of knowing where we want to go. It doesn't have to be today, but how do we work together in the future? So yeah, thanks for having me, and hopefully we get to keep this conversation going because it's pretty fun.
I have no doubt that we will. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks.